right, welcome back to Always Moving Forward. I just want to thank everybody who's been supporting us and showing up every week to see our videos. I just wanted to just to remind you guys that as you're watching the videos and you're visiting our site, just to go ahead and just hit that subscribe button for us. And then also as you're watching these videos, if this videos mean or take on some meaning for you and it's helping you. Smash that like button. Let us know. Also, leave a comment. Tell us what it is that you guys are getting out of this, the interviews, things that you're learning, and then finally, we want you to share these videos as well, because the whole purpose of our show is to help people find and follow their purpose. So, everybody has a purpose. Everybody, I say it all the time. You're uniquely designed with a purpose. So, share this with somebody so that, we can help encourage and inspire them. All right, guys. Thank you. All right. Welcome back to Always Moving Forward. I'm actually really excited about today's guest. I've been waiting for John Bell to come on. So I met John Bell through a friend of mine from church, actually. So her name's Cindy Buffkin. Thank you, Cindy.
My niece.
Cindy, every week I tell her about the people that I interview, and she's like, "Hey, you got to interview my uncle. You got to meet him. You got to interview him." So she told me a little bit about you. I'm like, yeah, you sound like an interesting guy. I'm gonna go hit him up and see if he'll come on the show. So, I talked to John on the phone a little bit and found out a lot about him. And I was like, I'm pretty excited. So,
thank you.
Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
Right. Thank you. We're gonna. I'm gonna have him introduce himself. We're gonna get to know him. He's got a very interesting story. I guess we'll go ahead and get into it. So, first, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, John Bell, born January 29th, 1947 in Fort Worth at St. Joseph Hospital, which is no longer there. It's a parking garage now.
Oh, wow.
And we lived in Fort Worth probably up until I was in the second grade. My father worked for the Internal Revenue Service downtown Fort Worth. I was kind of raised like an only child. I've got a sister, but she's passed now, but she was 11 years older than me, so she had to babysit me. That didn't endear her to me.
Right.
Me to her,
Right.
But anyway, she got out of the house pretty quick, so I'm kind of like an only child.
Right.
When I was in the middle of the second grade, my father got transferred to Midland,
Okay.
West Texas. So we moved out there, and I had been only this. You got to remember, this is during the real baby boom time.
Right.
So all the schools had annexes and stuff like that because they didn't have enough room for all the kids.
Right.
And we were only going to school a half a day, where I was in Fort Worth. And when we got to Midland, they were a lot more advanced than what I had. I think the only thing I remember in Fort Worth was, playtime and the nap.
Oh, wow.
That was about it. So we didn't learn a lot. So I wound up having to redo the second grade over again out there. And when I was in Midland, I made really good friends with a guy named Scooter Taylor.
Okay.
And we ran together a lot. We got into a lot of trouble. I'll put it that way.
Wow.
Right. I mean, you've been to West Texas, right?
Yeah, I've been.
There's not a lot out there to do.
Right.
But so we had a pretty good time. We would spend the night at each other's house, and that kind of thing. And growing up, and we did a lot of stuff. Like I had a go-kart.
Right.
It didn't have a centrifugal clutch. It was straight chain drive. So if you pushed it, it would start. When you stopped, it would die.
Right.
Well, they had a parade in town one day, and they asked all of us kids if we wanted to be in the parade, we could be at the tail end of it with bicycles or go-karts.
Okay.
Put crepe paper, that kind of thing. So we
Right.
decided that we could both fit on this thing.
Right.
One would use the gas and one the brake.
Right.
We'd argue over the steering. Anyway, as we would go at the end of the parade, every time it would stop, and have parades accordion out and back and stop.
Right.
And somebody had to get out and push and get it started again. We got into an argument. The bottom line is, I don't know who did what, but we took off. And just went right through the middle of the parade. Horses, the bands,
Wow.
The sheriff's posse.
Wow.
Everybody. And they chased us all the way home.
Oh.
I remember another time we'd gotten out of school, we rode our bicycles out to an old abandoned airport, and we were climbed up an old wooden tower, and we were making paper airplanes and lighting them on fire and watching them smoke,
Right.
And we started looking around, and we had a lot of places on fire.
Oh, wow.
Plus the tower.
Wow.
So anyway, we got into a little bit of stuff and kept getting into trouble. But the final straw was we had some cap pistols that we'd gotten for Christmas, both of us.
Right.
And they didn't have the little orange ends like they do now. They
Yeah.
were pretty real. In fact, they even actually had cartridges. I think you put a cap in them.
Right.
Well, back in the day, there was a little jewelry store about 4 or 5 blocks from my house, and all the kids would buy these discs down there with your name on it.
Right.
And that's how you knew who your girlfriend was. You'd swap these discs.
Oh, okay.
So we were in there a lot, so it wasn't like they didn't know us,
Right.
So we went in there one day and decided we would play. So we stuck our guns up there and said we were robbing the place.
Wow.
And put all those jewels in a bag. This lady was raking them off. Of course, she was calling the police, so we didn't realize that.
Right.
Handed them to us, and we walked out and came back and said, "Oh, we're just kidding."
Right.
That police weren't kidding.
Right.
So, my father was about beside himself, to say the least. But,
Right.
So Scooter Taylor and I, it was either go to TYC, which is the jail for kids, or he
Right.
said we could go to do a year in military school. So
Okay.
we both got sent to San Antonio Peacock Military Academy.
Okay.
It's not there anymore, but it was called the West Point. They had a lot of military schools back
Right.
then. And, actually, it wound up being good for both of us, I think, really, in a way.
Right.
But
So what kind of things did you learn from the military school?
I mean, when you go you got to remember most of the people my age, when I got out of high school, were going to Vietnam. So
Right.
you were either drafted or you enlisted, and I learned how to make a bunk,
Right.
fold your socks, march. We shot rifles. We learned about that. So,
Okay.
yeah, it helped a lot. As I look back on it now, I
Right,
wasn't too
right.
crazy about it at the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, when I got out of military school, my parents had once again they got sent to Dallas.
Mhm.
And my father bought a house over off of Lover's Lane in Dallas.
Okay.
And it was right where the airplanes take off and come over from Love Field.
Right.
Couldn't even watch a commercial on TV.
Mm.
And I went to Thomas Jefferson High School, which at that time was the biggest high school, I think, just about in, if
Right.
not the state, at least Dallas. And there were so many kids in there, I couldn't even see the blackboard. I saw a deal said trying out for football, meet in the gymnasium, and when I got there, I thought it was a pep rally. That's something.
Oh wow, I was living people show up.
So I told my parents, I said, look, I can't. If I have to stay in this school, I'm going to fail.
Right.
Well, my grandmother owned a house in Granbury at the time, so they said, well, go down there and you can live with your grandmother and finish school there. It was a small school back
Right.
then, so I did that. We went to Granbury,
Okay.
and I wound up graduating in 1966.
Okay.
And when I was in my senior year, my girlfriend got pregnant, so we
Okay.
wound up getting married. So back then, you couldn't do any extracurricular activity if you were married. You couldn't go to the prom. You couldn't play
Oh, wow.
football. And they went actually. The Granbury team went to state that year. I played football for them, but I couldn't do that.
Wow.
Anyway, we
So,
stayed.
so if you were married, they wouldn't let you.
No. I mean, now it's they don't.
Yeah.
There's no big deal now, but back then, yeah, you couldn't. If you were married, you didn't do any extracurricular activity. None.
Wow.
So,
What was the reasoning behind that? Did they?
I don't know. It's just the old timey way they did things, I guess.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
this was back in the day when everybody got spankings, and
Right.
I mean, when I started school, we had morning prayer at the Pledge of Allegiance and whip Johnny because I had already done something.
Right.
My whole life's been that same way. Nothing's changed.
Right.
But anyway, Yeah, I don't know what the thinking was behind that. You just couldn't, you know, I guess you were considered an adult. And,
Wow.
They didn't want you to. So. Anyway, we only stayed married about a year and a half. I worked at some small jobs in the city of Granbury. Spent one summer on a drilling rig. I worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week on the deck of the drilling rig.
Right.
12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I heard that's a really tough job.
Yeah. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I see why a lot of them drink, but anyway, we wound up getting divorced. Well, I had up until that time, I had been 3A because I was married and had a child.
Okay.
And surprisingly enough, as soon as we got separated, before our divorce was final, I got a letter from the government wanting to know my marital status.
Right.
So somebody snitched me off, I guess.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I thought, well, I'm not gonna let them draft me. I'm gonna enlist.
Right.
I had a friend of mine, Gene Bodecker in Granbury, and he had been in the 173rd Airborne Brigade. So I thought, well, I'll be a paratrooper.
Okay.
First, I wanted to be a helicopter pilot.
Okay.
So I went to Mineral Wells. That's where they were training them. I
Right.
talked to the recruiter. He goes, "Oh yeah, you got a high school education, and yeah, I can fix you right up." So he sent me to Dallas, did a flight physical and some tests.
Okay.
Didn't hear anything from him. Finally, I called him. He said, "Well, you passed your test okay, but you failed your flight physical." I said, "Well, how did I do that?" He said, "Well, you have to have 20/20 vision,
Right.
non-correctable,
Right.
to be in helicopter school." There were so many of them later on getting killed that they changed it where if your eyes were correctable 20/20.
Right.
I said, "Well, I guess I'm just going to join the Marine Corps." He said, "No, I won't do that." He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I want to be a paratrooper."
Okay.
So he signed me up. I went to the induction center at Dallas, and if you know if your ID for the military is either U.S. or RA. RA is regular Army, and that means you enlisted.
Right.
U.S. is draftee. So they saw that I was I'd volunteered, and they said,
Right.
"Oh, you're a volunteer. What do you want to do? You can choose what you want to do." And I said, "Well, I want to be a paratrooper."
Okay.
You know.
Right.
They said, "Well, yeah, but what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, all I could tell them was I wanted to be a paratrooper."
Right. Just want to jump.
I didn't know you could be a mess cook and be assigned to an airborne unit, or
Right.
That's how they probably thought, "Oh, here's some cannon fodder right here."
Right.
So anyway, went in the military and went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training. Well, about halfway through basic, they sent probably 30 or 40 of us to an auditorium and said, because of your scores you took when you were in the military,
Right.
you qualify to take special forces test. Well, I didn't even know what it was
Right.
at all. Guy was up on the stage with a green beret and all this. I thought, well, that's kind of cool, So he tells everybody there, he said, "Now, before you take this test, if there's anybody in here that doesn't feel good about jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, get up and leave." So
Right.
everybody got up and left, but there were 7 of us still there.
Oh, wow.
Well, I'd already volunteered airborne anyway.
Right.
So we took this written test. I didn't think any more about it. When I got out of basic training, I was sent to advanced training, which is your job. Well, they
Right.
sent me to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for combat engineer school.
Okay.
And I thought, why am I going to this? I don't remember signing up for an engineer.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But anyway.
Especially if you're jumping out of the plane.
Yeah, so, well, the airborne had engineers.
Right.
Well, anyway, so all 7 of us went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And it wasn't a lot to it. You build a little, like a log cabin bridge, and that kind of thing. It's World War II stuff, really,
Right.
basically. So we got out of there, and all of us went to Fort Benning, Georgia from there for jump school.
Okay.
Jump school is 3 weeks long. You have ground week, tower week, and then jump week.
Okay.
And so got through all that, made my 5 jumps, got my parachute badge. And then they lined us all up out there, and there's a lot of everybody. That was the only jump school in the
Right.
United States at that point. And you can imagine how many people were going through it.
Right.
But anyway, called these other guys' name out, the 7 I'd been with, and they had John Fitzgerald Kennedy School for Special Warfare, Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay.
Called my name out, and they said 173rd Airborne Brigade, Vietnam. And that's when I thought about that test. I said, well, I guess I didn't pass that test.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that was over with. My sergeant major called me in his office. He said, well, I got 2 sets of orders on you. One for the 173rd Airborne Brigade, Vietnam. The other was for John Fitzgerald's Kennedy School for Warfare,
Right.
Fort Bragg. Which one do you want to do? And I thought, well, let me think about that a minute.
Right.
I think I'll go to Fort Bragg.
Right.
You know, so when I got there, you had to be cross-trained in 2 different MOSs. So the MOSs you could choose from, engineer was one of them, which I already was, and then
Right.
Special Forces engineers basically demolitions.
Okay.
Communications, medic, light and heavy weapons,
Okay.
and if you're an officer, it's psychological warfare school.
Hmm.
But the 2 easiest ones were actually the engineer school and the light weapons school, so I went to that. These guys, the medics were trained for almost over a year. They actually can do surgery, minor surgery,
Right.
as a medic. And the commo guys sat there all night, and I'd listen to them with their little keys, key in the Morse code.
Right, right.
Driving you crazy. Anyway, so I was prepared to go to Vietnam. I graduated from Special Forces School, and they called my name out and said there's and the 5th group was the one that was in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
They called my name out and said 10th Special Forces Group.
Right.
Half of it was at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and the other half was in Bad Hopes, Germany.
Okay.
And I thought, I guess I'm not going to Vietnam.
Right.
So I went to Fort Devens. It was cold. I had never seen cold.
Right.
I'm sure you have. Where you
Yeah,
had,
good comes from Chicago. Yeah, definitely.
I'd never seen that kind of cold.
Right.
Icicles, if they fell, would kill you, off,
Right.
off the roof. So showed up there, and they said, well, you're assigned to an A team, but you have to learn how to snow ski. So they had several of us that they sent to New Hampshire, to the White Mountains.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that at all?
No, not to my
Okay.
knowledge.
Mount Washington?
Yeah, Mount Washington, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, anyway, it's really fancy ski school. And
Okay.
of course, we had these long pine tar Army skis, which
Right.
are not really what you want to ski with.
Right, right.
Anyway, they sent us up there to learn how to ski, and we did that and went up Mount Washington, skied in Tuckerman's Ravine, and came back down, graduated that. Came back to Fort Devens, and I did one jump while I was there at Devens on a training problem, and there was 8 feet of snow on the drop zone.
Oh, wow.
I was sitting out on the tarmac getting ready to load up in the plane, and they came running out there and gave us all these bear paw snowshoes. Said, hook that on your rucksack, you're going to need them. Didn't tell you how to put them on. They just
Wow.
So, I'll say that's the softest landing I ever had. I will say that. But I came up to that snow. You drop your rucksack off on like a bungee cord,
Right.
and then you make your landing. When you're in snow like this, you pretty much have to swim.
Right, you
almost.
stop,
So I
yeah.
pulled it over to me and tried to figure out how to put the snowshoes on.
Wow.
Anyway, we did one problem where, since I was the engineer, I was supposed to blow up a imaginary bridge that was there, and it was a field problem thing.
Mm.
Well, while we were there, after doing that, a blizzard hit,
Oh.
a total whiteout. I mean, it was horrible. Radios didn't work. I thought I was going to die out there in the cold. So
Wow.
anyway, we finally made it back, and my team was picked to go to Germany on an ORT, Operational Readiness Test, which is with other countries.
Right.
And you got to remember, this is the Cold War we're going to, as well as Vietnam. But anyway, I had been writing some letters. A lot of the guys I knew had come back from Germany, and I thought, well, it'd be neat to correspond with somebody
Right.
from Germany. So I started writing letters to this girl named Regina Neelis.
Mm-hmm.
And we had about 4 letters exchanged, and then that's when when my team said, well, we're going to Germany.
Okay.
So, for this ORT. So we all loaded up and flew into Rhein-Main Air Force Base and drove on the Autobahn through Munich. Have you ever been to Germany?
No, I've never been to Germany.
Well, this is all southern Germany in Bavaria, in the Alps. Beautiful.
Right.
And after we got through Munich and Bad Tolz, they went to a little town named Lingries,
Okay.
which is where Hitler had one of his old, it's like a, they called it a concern, but it's almost like an old fort up on top of a mountain.
Okay.
And that happened to be the town that this girl lived in.
Oh, wow.
I'd been riding. So
Right.
as soon as we got there, they canceled the ORT for whatever reason. So we had like free time.
Okay.
So a lot of guys went, you know, with tourism, went to the Eagles Nest and all these places in Munich and so forth. Well, I went to her house and we stayed together. We'd go out and hike up and down the mountains and
Right.
watch German TV, movies. And anyway, we went when they had they had the ORT and we did a night jump into what turned out, I mean, it was dark, so I couldn't really see where I landed, but we had to wait around because one of the guys had broken his leg on the jump, so we had to wait for daylight for the truck to come pick him up.
Wow.
When it got daylight, I started looking around, and I had jumped into a field where the farmers stacked their hay on poles. It's like teepees out there.
Okay.
And right by where I had landed was one of these big metal scythes with the big teeth sticking out.
Oh, wow.
And if I'd have under jumped the drop zone, I would have landed into a grape orchard. Trellises and the grapes grow up on the
Right.
field. Anyway, I was lucky that I didn't land on that damn rake. Anyway, we got through doing that.
So you have no way of seeing what you're gonna, in a jump like that, you have no way to see what's underneath you?
At that time, no. This
Wow.
was before they didn't have the night vision goggles like they do now.
Wow.
And we were making all real low jumps, probably 1,100, 1,200 feet,
Right.
and some lower than that.
Yeah.
I
That's
made
still
about-
enough to do a lot of damage. You land on the wrong thing.
Oh, I did about, I think I did 26 jumps before I went to Vietnam, and out of those 26, I had 3 malfunctions
Oh,
on my
wow.
parachute, so that's not good odds.
Right.
2 of them were May West, which means you have a cord looped over your parachute, makes it look like a big brassiere.
Right.
You can usually come down on them, but you hit harder.
Wow.
And then the last time I jumped, I came out of the plane and I counted 1,000, 2,000, usually about 3,000. You're feeling the chute open up because you've got a static line. You hook up. You've seen the World War II movies.
Yeah,
these guys
where they
hook
hook
to a
it
line.
up and then jump.
Well, you got 100 feet of line, static line, and then you got another 100 foot from the apex of your chute down to the harness.
Right.
So you fall that 200 feet before it's all out. Which, you know, if you're 1,000 feet, you got plenty of time.
Right.
But I counted 4,000 and I didn't feel anything, so I looked up and it just looked like a sheet up there. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I reached down and pulled my reserve, which is right here in your belly. And by the time it folds out, comes out and catches me, I'm looking right at the treetops. My boot and my butt hit the ground at the same time.
Oh, wow.
I saw when I hit the ground, I saw a rigger and a jump master running over there to me, and I thought, well, they think I'm hurt, you know.
Right.
Yeah, they came over and grabbed me and threw me over on my stomach and pulled out a little pack that's in the back of the pack of your parachute. And whoever packed that chute signed off on it, and they're walking off saying who they're going to tear up for a bad, you know, packing a bad chute.
Right.
I said, well, I'm okay, not that y'all care. But, anyway,
I was going to ask you. So, like the first time you jumped, what was that like? I mean, it's one thing you say, hey, I want to be a paratrooper, but you're up in that plane and you're finally getting ready to jump.
I got to be real honest. It's really easier to jump out of a plane than it is the tower that we jumped off of.
Oh, really?
And I finally figured that out. If you jump I think it's I'm trying to remember how high the tower is, but it's 54 foot or something, and you're on a cable.
Right.
And it's kind of like coming out of a plane, but you just hit that. They want to see how you land and all that.
Right.
And then you start out on smaller things, jumping off of them, and then when you get to the end of it, you're pulled up 250 feet, and you've got big arms out, and the chute's already deployed, and then they cut you loose, and you pull what's called a slip to get away from the tower. But the towers, because you're connected to the ground, it gives you a worse feeling because you really, you know, it's really harder to do it. When you're in an airplane, whether it's night, day, or whatever, the earth is just moving under you. You don't even think about, you don't get that same feeling.
Right.
So it's really easier, at least to me.
Okay.
But anyway, anyway, my jumping was not, like I say, people go thousands of jumps without ever having a malfunction.
Right.
But I think what was going on is they had so many people going through that jump school. They had people just packing those chutes real fast, and they're not really drying them. They're supposed to hang them up and let them dry out and so forth.
Right.
I remember jumping once, and I looked up and I saw leaves and candy bar wrappers and stuff flying out of the chute.
Wow.
So, you know,
Yeah, that's not good.
'cause all the services went to the same jump school.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't matter whether you're Marine Corps, Army, Navy,
Okay. So
and
it's
it really didn't matter what your rank was either.
Right.
So, I'm sure things are different now, I hope, but they have different chutes, I know that. We were jumping the old World War T-10 chutes, so they're not very maneuverable. But anyway, so on the plane coming back, we flew into New Jersey to go to Fort Devens, which is just outside of Boston, a place called Air. And I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? I knew they had a scuba school at Key West, and they had a HALO, which is high altitude, low opening school.
Right.
I wasn't sure where it was, but I thought, well, I think I'll volunteer to do that. That sounds interesting. Well, as soon as I got back, they said, well, you're assigned to the 5th Special Forces Group, and it's in Vietnam.
Right.
So I said, well, I guess all that skiing isn't going to help me a lot then.
Right. Right.
So, 69, I went to Vietnam.
And
And
when did you get back from Vietnam?
huh?
When did you get back from Vietnam?
70.
In 70.
I
Okay.
spent a year. But the bad thing was, and I had been told this, but I didn't think about it at the time. We flew into Cameron Bay, and they had told me before, said, now you're special forces, so you're supposed to go to Retried, which is the headquarters.
Right.
Well, I got off the plane, they put all of us in a holding barracks. They gave you a rifle and show you a pit in case you get attacked or whatever.
Right.
And the next day I got up and they said, well, we got your ride. And I said, okay. So I got on a helicopter and we flew into a place called Bamituit.
Okay.
And I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me. And I got off, the guy, Army guy with the Jeep waiting on me. He said, well, we're fixing to go to the outpost. And I said, what outpost? He said, well, the 18th Combat Engineer Brigade outpost. And I'm like, I'm not supposed to be here. They
Right.
said, well, it's where you're going. So
Wow.
got on the Jeep. I wind up going into they were building a road to a place called Banana Pass, Highway 1. And when I got there, Sergeant Walls greeted me, and he said, well, what are you doing here? I said, I don't know. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm pretty sure. I'm supposed to be someplace else.
Right.
He didn't have a little beret on that one there. And he said, well, can you run? They had heavy equipment, you know,
Right.
earth movers and the whole thing, you know, whole 9 yards. And he said, can you use that? I said, I have no idea how to use that stuff. I said, I built bridges that you put together like World War II style at Fort Leonard Wood. That's all I know. And he said, well, he had just had his gunner. He had a Jeep, and he would open up the road and lead the convoy out to where they were working. And he had just got his gunner killed off the Jeep. So he said, well, can you run an M60? And I said, you bet, I can do that.
Right.
So he had an M60 mounted in the back of his Jeep. And he said, all right, you're my gunner then. And I said, all right, I'm really not supposed to be here.
Right.
So anyway, first day, we went out on the job site, and I'm sitting there with my helmet and my flak jacket and my gun, just waiting for something, you know.
Right.
Nothing. Nothing happened all day. So we got ready to load up and turn around and come back with the trucks. And he said, now we're going to be, there was like a mountain on this side and then a valley out here. And he said, I want you to dust your gun off. I think he wanted to see if I could shoot it.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah.
So he radioed back to everybody in the convoy. We're going to be shooting. I said, okay.
The M60 is a pretty big gun, isn't it?
It's a machine. It's a
Yeah.
light machine gun.
Okay.
But, 308.
Okay.
Anyway, I swung it around and I started shooting out there. Next thing I know, the whole convoy is opening up, and I thought, well, I guess everybody wants to shoot, you know.
Right.
And then I noticed that Sergeant Walls was shooting this direction, and I'm shooting out here. And he said, they're up there, shoot up there. And I'm like, So I looked around behind me, and on the road, there were bullets hitting the road down
Oh,
there.
wow.
And they were coming off this mountain, so I swung around. I never saw anybody, but we were just shooting, you know.
Right.
And I guess what had happened was probably had an ambush set up for us. And when they heard me shooting, they thought they were seen or something, so they all loaded
Right.
up on the convoy.
Oh, wow.
So I got my first firefight, and I didn't even know I was
In the firefight.
Anyway,
Wow.
I stayed there probably, I want to say 2 months, maybe longer than that.
Wow.
And finally, they decided they knew where I was supposed to be. So
Right.
I took another helicopter and went up to the 5th Group Special Forces Headquarters. And I was really, really very fortunate because this was in '69, and they were actually even cutting back on troops at this time.
Right.
And Nixon had come in, president, and he was, you know, Johnson had built it all built up.
Right.
And then they're kind of drawing back a little now. And so most of the Special Forces guys that were going during this time were sent either to a CNC detachment, which is command and control. They had command and control north, central, and south, or a mobile strike force. And your life expect sound, either one of them was not really very good.
Wow.
It was the command and control groups would parachute into the north and try to capture people to come bring them back for information and so forth. But it just so happened there was a sergeant at a camp called Tuitar, A231, and he was due to return home, so they gave me his slot.
Okay.
And that camp was a really good camp. Was really good. Was a really good camp to be at because it had been there a long time. Had a big field of fire around it.
Okay.
It was in the Idrain Valley in Central Highlands. This is Tucor.
Right.
And so they only attacked us one time, and we kicked their butts so bad they would just go around it. You know.
Yeah.
The camps were interlinked from the DMZ, where you got Laos.
Right.
North Vietnam, Laos, South Vietnam starts right there at the DMZ, and then comes down, and then you got Cambodia next. And all these camps were interlinked all down through that side of Vietnam, all the way to the south.
Right.
And the Special Forces camps were 10-man units, 10 Americans there, and a captain, XO, and usually some South Vietnamese counterparts,
Right.
and then Mountain Yard tribesmen were the military, the manpower,
Right.
either the Nungs or the Yards.
Yeah.
And so the camp I was at, I guess the biggest town by us was close to us was Pleiku, probably, I think.
Okay.
But we were right on the Cambodian border.
Right.
And this camp was, I mean, it was fairly safe, really. I mean, we would go out, we'd take turns taking 2 Americans and about 30 Mountain Yards out on 2-week operations. And basically what we were doing was looking for caches of arms and ammunition where they had porters that would come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Right.
And it starts out as a big highway in north, but as it gets closer to Vietnam or to the DMZ,
Right.
it kind of branches off like tributaries
Okay.
coming in from Laos and Cambodia.
Right.
And I mean, they had bicycles, they had all kinds of ways of, you know, bringing not only troops, but B-40 rockets, ammunition, weapons,
Right.
and so forth, and they would cache them somewhere out there.
Oh.
And we were basically looking for that.
Right.
Most of the people we would come in contact with were transport people.
Okay.
And they shoot at you, but they run. I mean, they didn't
Right.
stand and fight like the NBA
Right.
or even the VC. So pretty good place for me to be, really. Pretty safe, and I was
Yeah.
with some of the best people that you could have been with. You
Right.
know, we trusted each other. And I was the camp engineer, so I had to take care of the runway. We had a dirt runway. The biggest plane it would accept was a Caribou, Army Caribou, which kind of clamshells open. Are you familiar with those
Yeah,
at
yeah.
all? Okay. And I had to take care of the runway. I had to make sure all the gun pits, the ammunition pits, everything was up to snuff. I had to make sure all the tangle foot was okay and
Wow.
stuff like that to take care of the camp. So it wasn't too bad. I mean,
Right.
it was hairy at times. but-
Like when you were talking about the first gunfight, you didn't realize you're getting into
No,
gunfight.
no, I had no idea.
So what was that like? I mean, how old were you at the time?
20.
In your 20s, yeah. Now you're out in the middle of a country you have no idea about, and now you're in a gunfight.
Yeah, I've got to tell you that if you've never really been to a third world country,
Right.
and I'm talking like Africa, Vietnam,
Right.
someplace like that, where these people, I mean, to them a bowl of rice a day is a big deal.
Right.
We in this country are so pampered and so out of touch, I guess we brought up spoiled.
Right.
And you have, you're crying and whining because you didn't get the go-kart you wanted or, whatever. And these
Right.
kids, have not, I mean, when we flew into Cameron Bay, first thing I saw was the garbage dumps and these little kids plowing through tin cans trying to find something to eat,
Wow.
So it really opens your eyes up.
Right.
And the whole time I was there, I mean, I pretty much kind of lost my religion, to be quite honest.
Right.
Because you see what happens to the civilian personnel of the country, the non-combatants.
Right.
Horrible.
Wow.
And it wasn't all on the North Vietnamese. I mean, there's a lot of U.S. Terrible things that happened, took place,
Right.
So, the American division wiped out that one whole town.
Oh, wow.
So it was, I think it's a big eye opener. When I went in the military, I was actually going to stay in, and by the time I got done with that, I'm like, no.
And it seems like it takes so much out of you, just mentally and.
I don't know how many Vietnam veterans you've talked to, or veterans of Iraq, Afghanistan, or Desert Storm, or whatever, but there's not a day goes by that I don't, not always bad things, but
Right.
there's not a day goes by that something doesn't remind me or bring it back.
Right.
And that never ends, it never quits.
Right.
I was haunted for a long time. One of the little Vietnamese kids was like 18 months old. We had medics there.
Right.
And the mountain yards would bring they'd come when they're sick or whatever, they'd bring their kids or whatnot in there. A lot of times I'd go up there, I didn't have anything to do, I'd help the medic. And
Right.
you'd see these people go in one end of a tent and come out the other end and they've got a handful of pills and they're swapping. I said, I'll give you 2 of my green ones for 3 of your red ones,
Oh,
that
wow.
kind of.
Right.
So you're like, this is what we're dealing with.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, the mountain yards were slash and burn farmers, basically. They didn't recognize boundaries,
Wow.
they're more like our American Indian was,
Okay.
basically.
Right.
Great people, don't get me wrong. They would stand right with you. If they liked you, when we're going out on an operation, if we stopped for a smoke break or whatever, they would make a perimeter around us. I mean, a night location, same thing. And if they, I hope it was because they liked us. It might have been because we could work the radios and get some
Right.
gunships or some support, But,
Right.
but yeah, they were really, really great people. In fact, they were actually more persecuted by the Vietnamese people than the blacks were in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's tough. Yeah.
Because they weren't even allowed to join their army until, I think it was 60, when I was there, 69, I believe.
Wow.
But they were just really, really good, they would hunt and farm out an area and then pack up, the whole village would move someplace else. They'd build some more huts and,
Right.
Just great people, really.
When you came back from Vietnam and you had to come back into America and try to acclimate from being in Vietnam, what was that like?
It's tough.
Yeah.
It was hard. I flew back into Seattle, and as soon as I got off the plane in Seattle, Fort Lewis, they give you a new fresh uniform, they muster you out, give you your pay, and the first thing they tell you is be sure you get that uniform off as quick as you can, because people don't like it. They don't,
Right.
you know, that was, when I was at Fort Bragg in '68, that's when Martin Luther King was killed. You know, it was a tough time.
Right.
The 82nd Airborne was all up north, riots in D.C.
That was a tough time in history to come back.
It really was.
Right.
You know, the public was just tired of the war. The news media, you gotta remember, that's probably one of the first large wars that was actually covered in real time by
Right.
correspondents. You know, World War II, you had a lot of film that the correspondents would take, but they went through a lot of it and cut out a bunch of stuff before it got on the newsreel back home, and it wasn't that way in Vietnam, because they had reporters from all over, French and
So it was harder to hide.
Yeah,
Footage.
and it didn't what the generals and so forth were telling the news media, what the news media was seeing was not the same.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So the public saying, hey, you know, and then you had the, you know, hippie movement. '69 was when Woodstock was going, and
Right.
you know, everybody's love and peace and everything. And so it was it was a time that a big time in our country. It really was.
Right.
So
how
if you
was-
didn't live through it, it's hard to
Yeah.
explain it to somebody.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. I see stuff out from it, all the time, and to me, it's just the way that soldiers were treated coming back.
Yeah, we can get a welcome.
Yeah,
I'm glad they do now, the way they do things.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got no welcome at all.
So, and you're still in your 20s.
Yeah.
At the time. So, how did you deal with that? How did you, were you able to overcome that coming back after everything you've been through while you were there?
I don't think you overcome it.
Right.
You really don't. I mean, it's I've justified a lot of it in my mind, and not everybody had the same. If you talk to one guy from Vietnam that was in, say, maybe he was a clerk typist in a large unit or something.
Right.
And the only thing he ever saw, maybe he heard some gunshots and saw some mortars hit a runway or something.
Right.
But that's different than being in a firefight.
Right.
For every one person that was in the field, I think they said there were 7 people working in the back,
Right.
whether it be supplying or, whatever. So it actually, Cindy, I don't think Cindy was even, I don't remember when she was born. My other 2 nieces, Lynn and Julie, met me at the airport. I brought back, I had this whole thing of uniforms and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they went through that, got everything. It was a big fad, I guess, for the kids to wear,
Right. Yeah.
a jacket or, that kind of thing. It took me a long time. It took me a long time to get my religious self back.
Right.
I guess would be a way to put it. Because I was pretty much, you see what you see over there, and then, like I said, the fighting is one thing, and that, we went into Cambodia when I was there, Nixon, we were going in there anyway. And I got into a deal there when I was wounded. But, that you can deal with.
Right.
But seeing the innocent people that are killed in this,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine like World War II or even Ukraine today. Look how they're devastating.
Right.
Cities.
Right.
I mean, the fighting is not done in some distant battlefield somewhere. It's done among the people.
Right.
So, and really, honestly, Vietnam didn't even have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It was after Korea, you know, and the Army didn't want to get in, the military really didn't want to get involved in Korea, but they were forced to because of the United Nations, basically.
Yeah.
But when Ho Chi Minh, who was in charge of the North at that time, he was actually educated in Paris, by the way. He had been there when, during World War II, when Chiang Kai-shek was the Free Chinese fighting the Japanese.
Right.
And he was assisted them, and he wanted to unite his country because the French basically ran Indochina.
Okay.
You have what used to be called Saipan, is actually Cambodia.
Okay.
Or, yeah, Siam. Anyway, in Vietnam, that's how Vietnam got divided to begin with.
Okay.
Because the Americans came in, colonialists, and the French. They ran the French out in '54.
Mm.
The Ho Chi Minh and his basically army of peasants took the French out.
Right.
And he had asked for support from Eisenhower at that time.
Wow.
And Eisenhower goes, "We're not getting involved in a foreign war. We're not doing
Right.
it." So he went to the only other place that he could go, which was the communists.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're more than willing. Oh yeah, we'll give you arms and whatever you need. You know?
Right.
So had Eisenhower helped Ho Chi Minh in the '50s, we probably wouldn't have had Vietnam at all.
Wow.
But you find out that everything really boils down to a dollar, and there was a lot of big companies in South Vietnam. Del Monte,
Mm.
I forget their rubber, had a lot of rubber plantations.
Right.
Goodyear, Firestone, all them. You know, there was a lot of interest in foreign people,
Right.
basically raping the country that they're
Supposed to helping.
taking,
Yeah.
helping.
Right.
And so it's not unreal to imagine that the people who actually lived there wanted to be united.
Right.
You know, whether it be under a democratic government or a communist government.
Right.
And the whole time we were there, the DM was the president, and he had an election, but it's not a free election if you're the only one running.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, so that's kind of how that happens. So,
Wow.
but you'll find out that we're gonna, you know yourself. There's wars and rumors of wars, and there'll always be that.
Right.
And it's somebody benefiting from
Yeah. Yeah. Even
it.
today.
We do it
so,
out of
yeah.
patriotism. The soldiers do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah. Somebody's got some
it all boils down to
invested
a dollar.
interest in.
There's always vested interest,
Right.
whether it be oil or whatever. You know,
Right. Lithium.
lithium is
Yeah.
that's a big one right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Tesla's probably going, oh, okay.
Right.
But yeah, it's and also like I was sent to that VA hospital in Dallas after I got back, and I'm sitting there, and of course I lose work every time I have to go down there.
Right.
I'm sitting there, and half the time you don't see a doctor, or you'll see one that's not the one you need to see, or whatever. This is the old VA. And I'm sitting beside people that have legs missing and stuff like that. And I thought, I'm pretty healthy. I don't need to do that.
Right.
I don't need this that bad. So I just quit going. And
Uh-huh.
they finally, one year called me and said, look, if you don't come back down here, you're not going to get any disability benefits. I thought, well, okay. By that time, I decided they had a different hospital.
Right.
So I went back and got some.
So what did now that you're back, what did you do?
Well, when I had left, the last part of my marriage at that point, I'd gotten a job at what was General Dynamics back then. It's Lockheed now.
Right.
So I worked in the machine shop. I worked as a saw operator, and then a chemical Miller dynamic etch operator, and a shop paint operator. And I was making pretty good money for
Right.
them. In fact, they offered to give me a deferment, war,
Right.
But I didn't want to do that. But so when I came back, that's the first thing I did was go back down there, and they were finishing up building the F-111
Okay.
at that time. And I worked with them until we all got laid off because the F-111 they quit building.
Right.
And so I went to. I had a brother-in-law that was a machinist. He got me several jobs working machine shop jobs,
Right.
things like that. And I remarried and had a son. We were living, well, actually we were living in Fort Worth, and then my wife at the time was working for a dentist in Cleveland.
Okay.
And we decided that I said, where is there to work in Cleveland?
Right.
Well, Cleveland, they had Santa Fe Railroad was a biggie,
Okay.
John's Mansfield, and Range Air Corporation. That was about it at
Right.
that time. So I went to John Mansfield and Range Air, and they would have hired me, but they didn't want to pay me what I wanted.
Right.
So I went to the railroad, and I talked to this lady up there, and she goes, "You want a job with the railroad?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "You'll never get hired." I said, "Well, why is that?" She said, "Well, let me show you." So she pulled out this big stack of applications and plopped
Oh,
it
wow.
up there and said, "All these people are ahead of you." I said, "Well, I can fill out an application, can't I?" She said, "Yeah." So I
Wow.
did. And I watched her. She put it right on top, stuck it back in the cabinet. Next
Wow.
thing I know, I got called.
Oh, wow.
And I put in for the Fort Worth Fire Department as well. They both called me on the same day.
Oh,
And so the fire department wanted me to come take a civil service exam, and the railroad had a job.
okay.
So I said, "Yeah, I think I'll go to the railroad." So I started as a laborer there. This was in '71. Yes, it was, yeah. Started out as, no, a little bit later than that. But anyway, I started out as a laborer, and then as jobs opened up, it's a unionized deal, so you had to bid on a job and get it. And the first job opening that came was freight carman's jobs. I took that, which basically is a welder. I mean,
Right.
most of the time I spent there, I was a welder. But I did that for almost 10 years. Yeah.
Wow.
And then they shut the shop down in Cleveland. We'd moved to Cleveland by then.
Okay.
And I'd gotten laid off twice from the railroad, and each time they were building that nuclear plant in Glen Rose.
Okay.
Well, if you could read a blueprint, you could get a job out there.
Oh, wow.
So every time I got laid off, I'd go out there and get a job,
Mm.
doing something. So when the railroad laid me off, they said, "Well, you can either go to Topeka, Kansas, or Galveston." And I didn't want to go to either one of those. Keep your job, but I didn't want to go to those.
Right.
So I went out to the nuclear plant and hired in as a pipe fitter. And I worked there for a while, and I would go, what really got me is my son was pretty small, but my wife would in the morning take me to Nolan River Mall in Cleveland,
Okay.
and I would get on a bus. I paid several of us for this bus to take us to Glen Rose and bring us back, for the
Right.
job. Anyway, he would be with her when she dropped me off, and then as I'd come back, she'd be there with him to pick me up. One day in school, they had, "What does your daddy do day?"
Right.
He gets up there and said, "My daddy rides the bus." That's all he knew.
Right.
I rode the bus.
Right.
They told me that, and I'm like, "Oh my God,
Right.
I can't do this any longer." So I was driving from Glen Rose back to Cleveland one day, and I saw two squad cars parked together in Nolan River Mall, and I said, "I think I can do that."
Right.
I didn't realize there was a lot more to it than that.
Right.
But, so they had one opening for a police officer, and I quit my job and went to the police department.
Right.
And went through the police academy in Arlington. It was T-close deal. And then I remember my first paycheck, my wife got it, and she said, "Oh my God." I said, "What?" She said, "We're gonna starve to death. We can't live on this."
Wow. Wow.
But it got better. Anyway,
Do you remember what your starting pay was when you went to
my starting pay?
to be a police officer?
Oh gosh. I want to say it wasn't but about, I don't know, 15,000 a year or something.
Wow.
I don't remember if it was even that much. It was, I mean, we were close to the area where you could get food stamps.
Okay. Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
Wow.
And little towns really didn't pay,
Yeah.
that good. But I found a job that I really, really liked, and it was, I never have liked being, even when I worked at General Dynamics, I hated going in that. It was like I was dragging a ball and chain going in there,
Right.
like I'm going to prison.
Right.
Just can't stand spending the whole day here.
Right.
Never saw the sun. I mean, it's a huge, like a half mile wide, mile and a half long building.
Right.
So
So did you feel like you found like a purpose?
I think
coming
I
back?
did, yeah. And I really like I like people, I like being out, I like,
Right.
every day's different.
Right.
I mean, in a little town like Cleveland, you know, you might go several days and there's nothing going on.
Right.
I mean, you know, but then again, there is, you know, sometimes a lot going on.
Right.
And we rotated shifts a lot. My first day, I'd gotten out of the police academy. And at this point in time, Cleveland, you had to buy, they gave you 2 sets of uniforms, a baton, a raincoat, and a hat.
Right.
That was it. You had to buy your leather gear, gun.
Oh, wow.
You know, I didn't have my gun, so
Right.
my first day on the job, or actually an evening, I rode around with the corporal. He was a training officer.
Right.
So he says, so we get out and he's showing me the town. And we got a call that a school, this was in the summertime, a school had been broken into over on North Angleton Street in Cleveland. So he said, well, they're gone by now, but I'll show you how to search a building. I said, okay. So we drive up, and this lady said they went through that door. It went into a kitchen. You can see it with glass was broken out.
Right.
He gets in there and he got his gun and his flashlight, and I'm behind him looking, you know, and
Right.
got my baton. And we go through all these different rooms, of course, nothing. We go into the auditorium, and there's a bunch of stuff they piled stuff up on the stage, I guess, for the summer.
Right.
We climbed up there, and he said, well, you look over here, and I'll look over on this side. I said, all right. So I saw a bunch of boxes, and I saw an upright piano. So I get over and I start moving boxes away, and this guy's hiding in this piano where the keys are, you know, underneath that. I like, so I beat my baton on, and I said, get up, get your hands up. He throws his hands up, and this corporal goes, ooh. So he runs over there to help me, and we get him arrested, you know. And that was my first day on the job.
Wow.
So Chief Claude Zachary was the chief, and he called me in his office, and he said, I heard you caught a burglar last night. I said, yeah, I did. He said, well, I think you better buy a gun.
Right.
I said, yeah, okay. So I should have known my career.
I'm surprised that they took you, took you out in the field without a gun, without any kind of, baton, but that's not really going to do anything.
No. Well, we were paired, so that was,
Right.
you know, I was with a training officer. But yeah, I immediately went and bought a revolver. That's what we had back then.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
So how long were you a police officer for Cleveland? And then you from Cleveland, you went to Fort Worth, right?
I went from Cleveland to Fort Worth. Yeah. I was there almost, I think almost 9 years. 9 years,
oh,
a little over. Yeah. And a friend of mine, you got to remember that was a small town back then too.
Right.
So they didn't have very many officers, and somebody almost had to die and will you their position. You know, if you wanted to be a detective or whatever, you didn't really have a lot of lateral movement.
Right. There's no room for growth.
Not much.
Yeah.
No. So a friend of mine that we took vacation together. He asked me one time. He said, "Take me to Fort Worth. I want to put in to try to get hired for Fort Worth." I said, "All right, I'll take you down there." So I took him down there, and at that time, all you had to do was go to City Hall, and they give you a little 3x5 card, and you fill it out.
Okay.
And the next test, civil service test, would come up. They would call you, and everybody would meet in, I think it was Will Rogers then, to take the civil service test.
Right.
So he said, "Well, you put in one too." I said, I never wanted to go to Fort Worth. He said, "Yeah, you put in for it." I said, "Well, I probably won't be hired anyway." So I filled it out. Sure enough, we both got hired.
Now, it's got to be a pretty big difference going from Cleveland to
huge difference.
Yeah, to Fort Worth.
I mean, Cleveland was, well, that's bigger now, but it wasn't. I mean,
right.
I was involved in one shooting in Cleveland, but while I was there, and it was off duty. It was a part-time job. Quinceañera at the Civic Center. But it's funny because many times we didn't have enough radios to go around. So if you had a part-time job, you didn't always get a radio.
Right.
So many times I've worked part-time jobs with no radio or anything. Well, this one time there was 4 of us working at the Civic Center in Cleveland. Hispanic quinceañera.
Right.
You know when a kid turns a certain age, they throw a big party.
Yeah.
Well, they had this party, and course, there's always a fight or two, and you just, you know, throw the people out and whatnot. Well, anyway, the party was over and everybody was leaving, and we're standing out there waiting on them. One of the guys went to get our pay, and so this kid comes running over to us, and he said, "Hey, there's a guy got a gun pointing it around at people there's a Hill College extension next to the Civic Center, and that's where a lot of them were parked." We said, "Well, where is he at?" He said, "There's a car out there, just pulling out." So we ran down there to try to stop the car and get a license tag or whatever.
Right.
So it takes off, and as it makes a turn in front of us, we're four of us standing out there, a guy sticks his gun out the window and starts shooting at us.
Oh, wow.
So all four of us
Or shooting.
opened up.
Yeah.
And we all had 9mm at that time, automatic, and I had a Browning high power, and it wouldn't function really well with hollow points. So I put hard nose round, you know, full metal jacket bullets in it all the time so it would read better.
Right.
My bullets were the only one that penetrated that car and got
wow.
But anyway, it limped away.
Yeah.
So we called the supervisor that's working, and he comes down there. He's a corporal, nobody else.
Right.
He said, "Well, I don't have anybody to come investigate this. You're going to have to investigate your own shooting."
Oh, wow.
So we did.
Wow.
We found ourselves guiltless of any wrongdoing.
Right.
So they found the car later, but not the guy. But he was pretty well hit pretty good. So I don't know what happened to him, but
Yeah.
they were from Mexico, so you know,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
disappeared, I guess. Anyway, it's funny because I told that when my investigator at Fort Worth, when I went to hire him with them, and they said, "Well, you can't shoot at a moving vehicle like that going on." And I said, "Well, we did."
Right.
"You can't do that." And I said,
Well, it's the person shooting
"Probably
at
not
you,
supposed to
yeah.
investigate our own shooting either, but we did." You know? So anyway, yeah, it was a whole different ball game. And when we got hired on at Fort Worth, we had to go back to another police academy. So I'd actually gone through 2 police academies.
Oh, wow.
And the thing about Fort Worth is made it so interesting to me is you had a lot of things. You had to spend at least 2 years in patrol,
Okay.
being a patrol officer.
Right.
And that alone, I always loved working midnights, that kind of thing, you know.
Right.
And, there's always, you know, maybe nothing for a while, and then always domestics, always something to go to, you know.
Right.
And a lot of funny stories involved in that. But I got to work vice. I got to work a federal wiretap, Title III they call them, where you're actually sworn in as a federal officer and you have a wiretap, you know, tapping going. And
Right.
I got to work in it wasn't a SWAT unit. They didn't call it SWAT. They called it something else, but it was kind of like SWAT.
Right.
And we did a lot of undercover buys, drug buys, things like that.
Right.
And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Had a lot of fun. I never wanted to. If you promoted, you would either be made a detective or you'd be a training officer.
Right.
And I had enough. I was a sergeant in the Army, and I didn't want to do that.
Right.
It starts to become political then. You know,
Yeah.
you're in an office and stuff like that. So
Right.
I never wanted to do that. So I never did want to promote. I just wanted to be out talking to people. And to me, that was more interesting. You know.
Right.
And I would talk to a lot of these recruit classes would come in, and the first thing I'd tell them is, look, you know, if you don't like people, you have to like people. If you don't like people, you're not going to make it 25 or 30 years in this job.
Right.
Because you're going to meet all kinds of people. You'll have to get on their level and whatever, you know, to talk to them.
Right.
So that's the reason I fell in love with police work. Plus, you feel like you're doing some good, you know.
Right. So now you've been shot at how many times?
How many times have I been shot?
Yeah.
5 times.
5 times. Now how many? Is it different incidents or?
No.
Just
I've
one.
I've been involved in 3 deadly force encounters where I killed
Right.
somebody. But the only time I was hurt was the last one, which was
The last
January 29, 2013. I was shot. If you Google it, they'll say the press says 3 times,
Right.
but they don't count one that hit me in the face, one that hit me in the shoulder here.
Right.
So this and the hip and the eye.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah.
So when you first, the first one you got to do was in Cleveland. Is that, and then
2 and 4.
and then 2 in Fort Worth.
Mhm.
So what was the second one? How did that one come?
Well, I was in a zero tolerance unit, and we got called to, there was a guy out on, trying to remember the name of the street, and I think I remember it, but get older, you start forgetting. But anyway, he was threatening the family with a shotgun and so
Oh,
forth.
wow.
His girl had left him, and,
So domestic.
so a domestic basically. So when we showed up there, and he had run into a separate garage beside the house.
Right.
And when I first walked out there, he had turned around and came out and saw me and started shooting at me with a shotgun, and then turned around and run. He was shooting like over his shoulder, you
Right.
know. So I shot him, but it didn't
Yeah.
kill him. But
Yeah.
he ran inside the garage and was threatening to kill himself, and put the shotgun in his mouth and so forth.
Yeah.
Uh,
How do you handle situations like that? I mean, it's
Well, I went in, at that time I smoked, and he was wanting cigarettes, and I'd throw him a cigarette and a lighter, and, you know, cut the gun in his mouth.
right.
He said, well, you shot me. I said, well, you'll be all right. We'll get an ambulance here, you know, you don't make it any worse.
Right.
Well, anyway, the lieutenant that night decided that I shouldn't be in there talking to him, so he pulls me out, and they call SWAT in. Well, the old garage was, you could see through slits out, and you could see these people sneaking around up to the garage. And
Right.
nobody would talk to him after that, and he couldn't get any more cigarettes. So he finally decided this was it, and he just finished himself off, blowing his head off.
Oh, wow.
But, so actually, I mean, even though I did shoot him, I didn't actually kill him myself, so I didn't have to go before a grand jury on that.
Right. Right.
Which was not like the other one.
Yeah.
But, you know, I told you I did that last letter deal.
Right.
Everybody in Fort Worth thinks I'm the guy that can't die. When I got in an explosion in Vietnam and lived through that. When I came back in '76, I had cancer
Okay.
in my foot. You know, the malignant melanoma.
Right.
I still think Agent Orange had something to do with that, but they say it didn't. So. But and it wasn't. It was like that, like a black mold deal,
Right.
except it wasn't any. It looked more like a seed wart. You know, seed wart's just like a rough bump that has no color to it.
Okay.
And I got it removed, and at that time I was working for the Santa Fe Railroad, and they sent me to Temple, and Scott and White was up there. The Temple Hospital is the Santa Fe Hospital, but nearly all their doctors come from Scott and White. So he took this thing off my toe. He said, come back in a couple of weeks and take the stitches out. Well, they called me and said, hey, it's bad. You need to be up here. It's cancer, and it's
Wow.
close to going into the lymph nodes of the bone.
Wow.
So I went back up there, and they took my toe off and took some lymph nodes out of my groin area, and I had no remission or
Oh, wow.
nothing else from that. And then and of course the other shooting stuff, car crashes and things. But then I had a major heart attack in 2007.
Wow. Wow.
My mother-in-law is from Wisconsin, and she's sitting around going, well, I'll probably never get to see my relatives. And I said, okay, I get it. I'll buy us a ticket.
Right.
You know, me and my wife took her to, you know, flew into Bloomington, I think it was, and I rented a car and drove across into Wisconsin. And she lived, I don't recall the name of the town, but all her relatives had a dairy. And if you've seen one dairy, you've pretty much seen them all. Trust me. But had to go look at everybody's dairy.
Right.
Amish were up there. But anyway, so stayed a little over a week, and we're on our way back to take the car back that I had rented. We still had 2 or 3, 4 hours. Bloomington is also where the Mall of the Americas is.
Right.
So the girls wanted to go to the Mall of America. I said,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Have you ever been to
No, I
It's huge. It's got a roller coaster inside. I mean,
Yeah.
it's big.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a large mall in America.
It's the largest.
Yeah.
So we went to a place to eat in there and had a really good dinner, and then got out, and I started looking through some of the shops. I got real nauseous, and I thought, man, my wife looking at me, she said, I want to call somebody. You look bad. I go, no, I just need some air. I just need to walk, you know.
Right.
Well, I'd walk 4 or 5 feet, and I'd have to sit down, and I thought, you know, this is not good, probably.
Right.
And so finally, I felt the pain go from here all the way across my chest, and I thought, well, that's not good.
Right.
And it felt like an elephant was sitting on me, and I thought, well, maybe you better call somebody.
Right.
So paramedics show up, and of course they're doing my vitals, and they give me a shot of this aerosol nitroglycerin. I thought, I feel good, I'm good. They go, no, you're not good, you got to go with us. Well, I told them, I said, look, because I mean, we got a crowd gathered around us now in this mall. I said, whatever you do, don't let me die in this mall, you know. I mean, I just can't, I don't think I'd live that down.
Right.
So they get me on the gurney and take me down to the ambulance, and we're riding along, and I felt my arm fall off the gurney, and I thought, that's funny, I can't move my arm.
Right.
So then I heard that siren come on the ambulance, and we're taking off faster, and I heard the driver saying, we're running code 3 with a white male, 59 years of age and full arrest and unresponsive. And I thought, man, somebody's not having a good day, you know. And then it dawned on me, not only could I not move this arm, I couldn't move anything.
Oh, wow.
And I wasn't breathing.
Oh,
I
wow.
thought, I should probably be breathing, you know.
Right.
So I tried to take a breath, and it was just, it's not like you're drowning. It's more like you're just way too tired to breathe. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And I could hear, I couldn't see. Well, I'd flatlined. I didn't realize it, but I flatlined. And apparently, if you've got some kind of electricity going through your brain, you're not quite dead. There's something happening, you're still here. That's the last thing to go.
Wow.
Is hearing.
Right.
Because I could hear a guy saying, "Stay with us, Mr. Bill, stay with us." And I'm like, he's talking to me.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
So evidently, we weren't very far from a really good cardiac care hospital, thank goodness.
Yeah.
If we'd have been in Wisconsin, a vet would have been it.
Yeah,
I'd have been dead. The LAD is the left anterior descending, which is the one they call the widowmaker.
Yeah.
And usually, if you get that, you're pretty much done unless you can really get to it.
Right.
You know. So we were bouncing into the parking lot, and I could feel moving the gurney. I could feel taking my clothes off, and I heard somebody say, "Get the paddles ready." And I thought, they're gonna shock me. Shit, that's gonna hurt.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But anyway, as I felt the arm pull my shoulder, pull me upright, and this guy's hit me, and I thought, man, this guy's beating me. I found out later that his doctor, and it's called a precordial thump.
Right.
And he actually got my heart started again.
Oh, wow.
And then they went in my groin area and went up and put a stent in this artery, and I could hear them when they were talking about it. I heard the doctor say, "I got blood flow," and I go, "Oh, you do? I can feel that." You know? So actually, I died in the ambulance.
Wow.
But I don't know if this. I probably shouldn't say it, but if you die from a heart attack, it's really not that bad. I mean, because all you want to do is just be left alone and go to sleep.
Yeah.
You're just tired.
Yeah.
That's all, you know, it's not like you're gasping for breath.
Right. I actually went to the same thing.
Did you?
Yeah. So, I think the same, the Widowmaker.
Yeah.
I was actually in the hospital. I did my first,
You were in the hospital
dialysis.
when you had it?
Yeah.
That's fortunate.
Yeah, exactly. Because I had just finished up my first dialysis. So I had a kidney transplant.
Right, yeah.
Well, I was in kidney failure at the time. So I had just gone through my first dialysis. And then bringing me back, I had a heart attack. And I felt the same way. All I wanted to do was just sleep. You know?
You're just too tired to do it.
Right. You feel extremely weak.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing the same thing. They're like, you know, stay awake, stay with me. And then they took me in and did the same. They had to run down and put a stent in. They found out that because with dialysis, they're drawing your blood.
Exactly.
You know, put it into the machine and put it back. Well, they realized that my artery, the main artery, was 95% blocked while they were doing that.
Put a lot of stress on that artery.
So they ended up putting a stent in
I guess I was there for a couple of weeks before I could finally, they let me fly home, you know.
Right.
And then when I got back, they sent me to Matlock, to that heart place off of Matlock in Arlington.
Right.
And I had this doctor, he was from Wisconsin, had no sense of humor, but one of the best cardiac care guys. And I started looking around some of these people that were having heart attacks. My gosh, they're young people.
Right.
You know?
Right.
You know, they put you on a treadmill and check your oxygen level and all this kind
Right.
of stuff. Well, one day I was running on that treadmill and there was this young kid next to me and I started talking. We started talking. I told him my story. He said, yeah. He said, you know, I'm on my second heart transplant.
Wow.
I said, you are? He goes, yeah. He said, me and Mom were at the grocery store and we got to the cash register to check out and I just fell down there with this heart attack and
Wow.
said, a man, he told me what he looked, had a real nice suit on, came up to him and put his hand on his chest and said, you'll be okay. Anyway, they got the gurney and they're taking him to the ambulance and he told his mom, he said, wait a minute, I didn't get a chance to thank that guy. Or, you know, she said, what guy?
Wow.
He said, the only people that were there were me, you, and the checkout guy.
Oh, wow.
And he said, well, this guy, and he explained what he looked like. He said, there was nobody there like that.
Wow.
He said, you know, I think it might have been my guardian angel.
Right.
How do you argue with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how do you argue?
You can't argue with that.
Can't argue with that.
Right?
So that's kind of where I got a lot of my religion back again.
Oh, really?
From that heart attack.
Wow.
I realized that, you know, I had come close to death so many times that either I have a really good guardian angel that I'm steadily wearing out,
Right.
or I'm being left here for some reason.
Right.
And of course, another one was the shooting. I mean, I was from here to that chair right there. We were blasting away at each other.
Wow.
And he shot first. He shot me, took my eye out, and then shoulder one here, and then.
So what led up to that? I mean.
Well, by this time in my career, I had become a motorcycle officer. Like I said, I didn't want to promote. Well, there's more money in promoting.
Right.
But I didn't want to promote. But if you go to a specialized unit like motors, back then was very specialized. All the part-time jobs came through motors, came through the traffic division. So I got a lot of outside work, and plus I was paying child support and stuff like that. So
Right.
I could make as much as a lieutenant just being on the motorcycle. You're leading parades, you got escorts, and,
Right.
you know, like when the Super Bowl came and all that. You know, you can make a lot of extra money
Right.
being on a motorcycle. And plus, I like motorcycles. That's another. I've ridden them all my life. So so I was in a motor unit, and that particular day it was raining, and we don't. I didn't like riding in the rain. I mean, you're gonna go down. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
we have more people injured just in training. You know,
Oh, wow.
on a motorcycle because you're doing all kinds of things with them that most people don't do. you
Right.
know. And so myself and another officer named George Rusnick decided we would get in a car together and take accidents. So we were riding in a car and we took 2 or 3 accidents early on, and then it kind of tapered off. We went and ate lunch, and then pretty much nothing on the radio. So I said, well, let's go see it. I had a good friend off of 121 and Carson Street.
Right.
You familiar with that area?
121. I don't know where Carson is.
Well,
In Fort Worth.
you know where Mike's Off Road is? Or, well, if you're on 35 going north,
Right.
and 121 comes in,
Right.
you got that golf thing right there. Anyway, you take off on 121 going back to the east.
Right.
Carson Street's one of the turns before you get down to where 121 loops in with a loop.
Okay. Yeah.
And a friend of mine owned an automotive shop there named Second Opinion. It also had a machine shop with it. And when my wife and I started racing drag cars,
Right.
they would help me out with my cars.
Okay.
So we became really close friends. And actually, when Halstead became the chief, he came from Phoenix, Arizona.
Mm.
We all met, everybody met him, the officer met him at the POA building, he gave a talk and everything. Anyway, it was all over with, and I was walking out in the parking lot, and he came over to me and he said, hey, I've heard that if I ask you something, you'll tell me the truth. And I said, I'll tell you the truth. You may not like it, but I'll tell you the truth. So we kind of became friends.
Right.
And his wife had called me one time and said that when he left Phoenix and came here, he brought a '68 Camaro that his uncle had owned. And she had all these parts she'd been giving him for several Christmases, and he wasn't building it up like it like he wanted to do.
Right.
She said, "Do you know anybody who can do this?" And I said, "Yeah, Second Opinion Auto. They have a lot of not only race cars, but old cars and stuff that they fix." So I introduced them to the chief, and that's how this kind of whole thing kind of took about. But anyway, and it's like one street. If you go down Carson, say south,
Right.
it's like Fort Worth's here, Haltom City's here.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You could spit into Haltom or Fort Worth
Right.
from their door.
Right.
Their building.
Right next door.
So yeah, right next door.
Yeah.
So I told George, I said, let's go over to, and I had permission from the chief anyway. I said, let's go over to Second Opinion and get some coffee and kill some time, and maybe we'll get another call.
Right.
Well, as soon as we showed up over there, the Haltom City Police and I think it was a Tri-County Task Force was going through the whole place, and it was still raining.
Right.
And we were inside, and they walked in and said, "You seen this guy?" And they described what he looked like. I said, "No, he just showed up,
Right.
So they searched all through the back, through the cars out in the fenced-in area of the building and so forth, and went on going south.
Right.
So after about 45 minutes later, Dan Harris, the owner of the business, asked me, he said, see if you can find out what's going on."
Right.
So I walked outside, and a female Haltom City lieutenant was walking by, and I stopped and was talking to her. And she said, "Well, this guy is a Aryan Brotherhood, been out of prison not very long, and the task force had been making dope buys from him.
Right.
And this particular day, they decided they would take him down. Well, he managed to get in the car and pull out of some house in Haltom City.
Right.
Anyway, they had a short pursuit where he wrecked out at 121, and the last time they saw him, he was jumping fences behind in your friend's business."
Right.
And I said, "Okay." I told him, and they said he thought he had a pound of meth or something like that on him. So I said, "Okay." So he said, "Well," and while I was talking to her, I was listening to her radio.
Right.
And you could hear reports of him way down south. So everybody's going down that way to look
Right.
for him. So I figured he was out of the area. So I told Dan, he said, "Yeah," he said, "he might have hit his dope in my back area there somewhere. Let's go look." So
Right.
me and Dan Harris and George Resnick got out and started searching. They'd searched the building. We knew he wasn't in the building. So
Right.
this is a big fenced-in area, and customers' cars and other cars that they owned are all out in there. So
Right.
I started on one side with Dan, and George started on the other side. And I actually found where he climbed over the fence and the Bluetooth had fell out of his ear.
Yeah.
I found that. Anyway, we got down to the last vehicle in the corner of the yard, which was an old, I think it was like an S10 pickup. Didn't have any tires on it, just sitting on the ground, and it had a bunch of old tires in the bed.
Right.
And he'd been there for, he told me 6 or maybe 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, we went through the tires, me and Dan, and I looked, and you couldn't see through the glass because it was so frosted over with dirt and stuff,
Right. Right.
But I looked, and I thought I saw something, but I wasn't sure. And about that time, me and Dan are standing both by the driver's side door, so Dan reaches over and pulls the door open.
Right.
Well, this guy is sitting in the floorboard with his back against the passenger door and already had his gun out.
Oh, wow.
And he had a 380 Versa automatic.
Wow.
Anyway, so I pushed Dan this way, and he went and hid behind a dumpster. And now I'm face to face with the guy, and all I saw was the barrel come up, and then he shot. He was
Wow.
he was ready to kill anybody that could
Well, he was pretty close. I mean, I was like,
Oh yeah, just
within close
matter of
range.
feet.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, if he say that box is him,
Right.
and I'm right here, that's about how far.
Wow.
So the first shot took my eye, and it was it really didn't it didn't go in the eye.
Right.
It was a hollow point, and it hit that bony orbit,
Right.
about where the eyebrow is.
Yeah.
But the jacket blew up, and it went into the eye, and the copper jacket went deep enough to cut the optic nerve.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, that felt like somebody hit me in the head with a ball peen hammer,
Wow.
And then the one that hit me on the side of I don't know if you can see a scar there.
Yeah.
I think that bounced off the A-pillar maybe of the,
Right.
in other words, because he was just kept, shooting.
Yeah.
And then I got one in my shoulder, and then I don't remember doing it, but I remember having my gun in my hand. I was coming up out of the holster, and I was going to go for a two-hand hole. And when I did, one of his shots took that finger.
Oh, wow.
You know, and threw the arm back like that, and I remember, this is all in slow motion.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the finger dangling. I thought, well, that's good. Can't see out of this eye.
Right.
Now my fingers, you know.
Right.
So I started shooting, and I wasn't seeing real good out of this eye because of the
Right.
pain and the blurriness, you know. And I thought, he's sitting down low, so I thought if I shoot up like this, I'm going to catch him somewhere in this area.
Right.
You know? And he's still shooting. Anyway, I shot like this and just kind of went up, and I don't know, I put 2 or 3 through the floorboard and the seat, and put, he had his knees drawn, he had his knees drawn up, and I put 1 in each knee and then 2 in his chest, and then out the windshield.
Yeah.
And his last round, he had 8 rounds. His last round, by that time I'd hit him and dropped down, and his last round hit me about 1 inch above Mr. Willie here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Went into, and it went in, traversed here, and went into the big ball of where your hip
Right.
joins that major bone.
Right.
In fact, that's the only one they got out intact.
Wow.
And so the whole thing took 3 seconds.
Wow.
And 15 rounds were fired. The reason I know that is because where he had jumped that fence coming into this lot, there was a business next door that had a camera and a recorder. Now the camera didn't get any of the shooting, but the recording got the shots.
Right.
And from the
they
time
sound. Yeah.
From
Yeah.
the time the first round fired till the time the last round's fired is 3 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's crazy. So and
I killed him, but he.
so that's all adrenaline. I mean, because you're shot in the eye, you lost your finger. I mean, you got shot 5
Well,
times at close range. You're still
Yeah.
able to
Well,
return fire. I mean,
a lot of people ask me how you do that, and I said, well, you know, here's the thing is, don't ever give up.
Right.
Never give up. And
Right.
I mean, what am I going to do? I mean, I got a choice of standing there and shooting back, turning around and running and getting shot in the back,
right,
or falling to the ground in a fetal position and getting shot.
right,
Probably, you know.
right,
So your options are pretty limited, but a lot of people say, well, I would have run. Well, you know, I don't, you know, I just think I should, you know, hold my ground and try to, you know,
right,
because if you're prepared, I mean, you're never really prepared, but
right.
mentally you can stay in the fight. You're a lot better off than
Right.
if you try to get away, you know.
And that's what a lot of these people don't understand is how quick something like that can escalate.
The three shootings I was in as a police officer, I didn't know I was fixing to get in until I went
Right.
in. And I tell a lot of the young people that are coming and becoming police officers now, thank goodness, or coming out of the military.
Right,
And a lot of them combat veterans, and I've talked to many classes of them. And the difference, even when I was in the military, when you go out of the gate from your compound, wherever you're at, you're locked and loaded,
right,
right? You go out that gate and you're expecting something
right,
all the time. I mean, you know, it still may surprise you, but you're still looking and
Right.
you know, you're in a position where, you know, hey, I may get shot at.
right,
As a police officer, you don't have that luxury. You have to react to something that's already happened to you.
right,
So you don't. Many times you're ambushed as a police officer because you're not really expecting it.
Yeah,
Particularly at a car stop
right,
or domestic disturbance. Those are the two biggies, you know.
right,
I know one guy that was killed in the 7-Eleven in Fort Worth because he went in to get him a cup of coffee at 3 in the morning and he didn't
Wow.
realize they were getting robbed. You
wow,
know.
yeah,
So, but and 9 times out of 10, the shootings that unless you're on a SWAT team,
right,
if you're on a SWAT team and you go in a house where you know there's an armed person in there, you're as ready as you're ever going to be.
right,
You know what I'm saying? And you're trained for that.
right.
But the average
And you have the
police-
right equipment because you
Yeah,
know it's
exactly.
most likely somebody's going to take a shot at you.
Exactly.
Right.
So, you know, the average police officer making the average calls, and you know, particularly in traffic division, you get in a pattern of, you know, making a stop,
Right.
walking in. May I see you, sir? I'm Officer Belfort, traffic division. May I see your license and insurance? And
Right.
This the reason I stopped you is so and so, so and so, and you know, you get in a routine,
Right.
and you lose your sense of safety.
Right.
You follow what I'm saying?
Right.
And sometimes you'll think about it and you think, okay, I need to go to the other window over here and make them roll the window down where I've got the advantage and check the trunk and that
Right.
kind of, you're taught all that stuff, but
Right.
it's very easy to get complacent,
Right.
if you will. And as a traffic officer, you might make 25, 30 stops a day, and the average person that gets stopped, to them, it's a big, big deal. They remember every detail of it.
Right.
But you don't.
Right.
That's why they would send me to I had to go to court. I was always working evening shifts, and I'd be at court, and I'd go down there, and they're like, "You remember this ticket?" No.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to sit there and lie and say I do.
Right.
In court.
Right.
I'm getting paid overtime regardless whether I remember it or not.
Right.
Now, if somebody really pisses me off or something,
Right.
yeah, I'm going to write something on the back where I do remember that ticket.
Right.
But, yeah, it's just a whole different, people don't realize a lot of times what officers go through.
Yeah.
And just like any profession, there's good ones and bad ones. I mean,
Right.
you're not going to get into a department as big as Fort Worth, Dallas, or Houston, or whatever, and not have some bad apples in there.
Right.
It's not. That's just the nature of the beast. Whether any company,
Right.
But for the most part, trust me, police officers do not get paid enough to go in there. And I've had people say, "Well, you just want to go ahead and shoot somebody." Well, no, I don't. That's the last thing I want
Right.
to do.
Right.
Believe me,
Especially now. I mean, now it's just.
Oh, they'll throw you under the bus now.
Right. Exactly. So, and that's the thing I was talking to Chief Kerbel about last week, is that now when you go in, not only are you trying to figure out that situation, in the back of your mind, you're also playing out that somebody might be watching you with the camera.
Oh, always.
And
You're
if
being
you
recorded.
Yeah, and if you make the wrong decision, you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So you're already going into an uncertain situation. You're uncertain about this. There's high risk that something can happen during a stop. I mean, it happens all the time. So you're playing that in your mind, and then you're playing that in your mind too. If I make the wrong decision, the public was to crucify you for it.
Well, exactly.
So there's a lot of pressure going on while you're making those stops.
It's to the point where I tell guys if they want to become, if they want to work for a city, I said, go to the fire department. Everybody loves it.
Right.
I never will forget my mother-in-law was living on Bonnie Bray, and she would fall. Pretty large woman, she fell a lot. And she got to where she knew all the firemen by name.
Right.
Because they would come help her up,
Right.
Well, one day I was out riding, and I heard a call go over the radio, and I recognized it was her address. They were going to call the fire department. I said, no, hey, that's my mother-in-law. I'll take the call. I'm not too far away. So I pull up. I go in the door of her house, and she's laying in the kitchen on the floor in her nightie. She fell down.
Right.
And she looks up. She said, where's the fireman? I said, I took the call. I want to help you up. No, I want the handsome fireman. I said, well, you're getting me, whether you want it or not.
Wow.
But yeah, that's I don't know. I wouldn't really recommend. I love being an officer. Don't get me wrong. I love people. I love to talk to people.
Right.
I would get chastised all the time because I'd spend too much time talking to people on a traffic stop or whatever, or give too many warnings.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you tell me how many I'm supposed to give. Well, they can't do that.
Right. Right.
But I just love talking to people, hearing their stories. I like to, see if there's something I can do for them.
Right.
So that, to me, that was I mean, the time goes by quick. Go home with a feeling of, accomplishment, or just really crappy because I was at the church shooting. I was one of the first ones there on that deal. I watched a lady burn up in the back of a car and went off the freeway in a domestic dispute with a ex and kidnapped her. And so, there's a lot of bad things you see.
Yeah.
That you can't get out of your mind, really.
Right.
I've seen whole saw a whole carload of kids that were burned up in a rollover deal. And,
Wow.
you know, stuff like that really gets to you. Not unlike seeing the civilian casualties in a war zone, you know.
Right.
So you do have that, but, and that's why a lot of people don't really realize, they see cops and they hear them talking and they think, oh man, that's a morbid sense of humor. Well, you have to have some sense of humor. You can't,
Right.
and it's not like normal people,
Right.
because you can't, you have to put that back and not make a joke out of it, but,
Right.
you know,
It's just a way that
It's
people
what-
deal
yeah.
with it.
When I was working in Vice, they made me and another fellow go to, they were arresting people at the males who were in the Forest Park,
Yeah.
you know, meeting down
Right.
there. So they sent me and another fellow down there, and this guy was married, had like 5 kids, but he was real effeminate acting.
Right.
So we get down there, and every time somebody would approach him, I'm always having to be his backup, like help him make the arrest, you know.
Right.
And this went on for weeks. And I'm not arresting anybody. I'm just, they're going to him.
Right.
And I got home and I told my wife, I said, you know, I'm starting to feel kind of like a wallflower, you know.
Right.
They don't want me.
Yeah.
I went to the dance and nobody would dance, you know, with me,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And she was laughing. She said, you just look too much like a cop. So after that, they moved me over to a car picking up prostitutes,
Oh,
you know, unmarked, you know,
Yeah.
plain clothes. And apparently I look like some guy that's just in dire need of a BJ. You
Right.
know? I mean,
Right.
so, 'cause, man, I was catching them right and left.
Wow.
And actually one of the worst fights I was ever in was doing that.
Oh, really?
I'm in an old Jeep Cherokee, and I'm
Uh-huh.
driving, working up and down Camp Bowie. And I got so used to it. I had my badge inside my shirt,
Right.
had a little 38 in my waist, and a radio. And
Right.
I'd get flagged down by these girls or whatever, and we'd make a deal, and well, you're busted.
Right.
Oh, I've never done this before, you know. And I'd
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I'm over here at this address. They'd come pick her up and take her home.
Right.
I mean, I got so easy. I was doing it so many
Right.
times, you know. It was just like nothing.
Right.
Well, I was driving down Camp Bowie in the old Western Hills Inn motel, if you know where that is.
Okay. Well, I know what Camp Bowie is, but no.
Camp Bowie's a long street. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, went past her and she's standing there and she waves at me and I stopped. She said, "Hey, you want a date?" I said, "Oh yeah, I want a date." You know, so she
Right.
hops in. She said, "Well," I said, "where can we go?" And she said, "Go across the street over here to an old Hawk Electronics that was shut down,
Okay.
dark parking area." I said, "Okay."
Right.
So we drive over there, and we made a deal for $20 for oral sex.
Right.
So after we made the deal, I pulled my badge out and I said, "Well, you're busted." And I got on the radio and said, "Hey, I'm on Camp Bowie." Well, this is the first one that had tried to get away.
Oh, wow.
And so she's in the passenger side.
Right.
So she pulls the door up. So I grab her. When I do, I drop my radio. When I grabbed her, she turns around on me like a wildcat.
Wow.
I mean, she is hitting, clawing, scratching. I mean, it's all I can do to just hold this woman.
Right.
And she was not a little girl either.
Yeah.
And she dragged me, I don't know if you know how the consoles in those old Jeep Cherokees were pretty tall.
Right.
She dragged me over that console
Wow.
and out onto the pavement. I'm falling on top of her, and the open door swung over my back, and I couldn't get away from her. And
Right.
she is just literally, I mean, it looked like I fell in a wood chipper.
Oh, wow.
She is
Clawing
clawing and scratching.
Wow.
And I finally got the door off of me, and the only thing I could think of, I grabbed her by the legs, and I pulled her around the back of the Jeep. And the only thing I could think to do was just to paddle her, you know. So I
Yeah.
popped her one time.
Right.
Well, there's this little Hispanic kid getting off work at Taco Cabana, who was just right next door.
Right.
Well, all he's seeing is
Is
this
you
guy
get-
beating this
right.
woman, right?
Right.
So he's running at me, and I heard him, and I pulled my pistol out, and I turned around like that, and he does one of these Wile E. Coyote stops, you know,
Right.
and spins around and runs. He said, "I'm calling the police," and I said, "Please do," you know,
Right.
because I can hear the squad cars. They can't see me over in the dark, but they're just zoom, zoom,
Oh,
zoom.
pass by you, yeah.
But all they knew is I was
Did you
on,
already dropped your radio so they didn't know
yeah,
where you were?
I was on Camp
Yeah.
Bowie. That's all they knew, and I couldn't get
Right.
away. I couldn't. She kept coming to, and I'd have to. By
Right.
this time, her pimp is coming out of the Western Hills Inn. Now he's standing in the median,
Oh, wow.
so I'm threatening him, fighting with her.
Wow.
Anyway, finally I saw a squad car pull into the Western Hills Inn and circle around, and when he did, his headlights hit me. So he came over, and we finally, and the pimp ran off. We finally got her arrested, right? And I mean, there's not a place on me that's not bleeding.
Wow.
And the guys look at me, they go, we got to call EMS 99, which is for the officers for, you know.
Right.
So the EMS 99 shows up, and they took one look at me and they said, you need to go to Concentra, which is a medical place for the city employee.
Right.
By this time, it's just about breaking day, so, because they don't know what she had or didn't have. I mean,
Right.
there's no telling, you know.
Right.
So I go to Concentra, and I'm the first one. They just opened up. I'm the first one in the door, and I told them, you know, I need to see a doctor. So I'm sitting there, and pretty soon the rest of the city employees, the water department, the street department, the parks department, they're all showing up to see people. So there's maybe 40 people in this waiting room.
Wow.
So this nurse walks out, and she looks around the room, and she goes, "Where's the guy that got bit by the whore?"
Wow.
I go, "Be me."
Wow.
Every eye was on me.
Wow.
But that one was a beast, man.
Yeah.
But,
So let me ask you, what advice would you give someone who wants to become a police officer, especially like in this day and time?
well, you know, it's going to be different advice than I used to give them because it's a different day and age now.
Right.
Number one, it's going to be a rare case that the upper echelon is going to be on your side if something newsworthy happens with you, like a shooting or
Right.
some type of violence. I think what needs to happen, honestly, is everybody that's so critical of the police should probably go to a major police academy somewhere, and they've all got shoot, don't shoot
Right.
scenarios,
Right.
whether it be with
The
you know,
simulators.
simulators.
Yeah.
Go through that thing and see what you would do. Most people that have gone through them, and I've seen them,
Right.
they come away going, "Oh my God," because I shot the little girl.
See,
I can't believe I did that.
Yeah,
you know?
that's one of the things I was talking to Chief Kerbo about last week is they had a event called Coffee with Cops, and I went to one of those, and I went through one of their simulators. So I went through because I went through the shooting, and I went through the car simulator, but the shooting simulator. So it had it was a half a circle with these big screens.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I noticed is that every single person, there's probably I want to say about 20 people that was in there with me, maybe even more. But every time they would come up for their turn, they already had their weapon drawn. You know, you already have the scenario playing out. And, you know, like you're talking about with the difference between law enforcement and combat. You know, combat already has their gun, you know, pulled. But law enforcement, you know, they're not. Yeah, you don't have it. Your gun's supposed to be holstered. But all the people who complain, you know, about use of force, already are at the use of force level going into the simulator.
Well, see, in the academies teach you a force continuum.
Right.
Okay. The very first force continuum is just your presence.
Right.
In uniform.
Right.
You have a commanding presence.
Right.
You represent law enforcement. That's the first part of the force. The second is your voice. You know, take your hands out of your pocket. Stand there. Don't approach me anymore. Whatever it be. Right.
Right.
That's the second level of force.
Right.
The third level might be a hand touch. You know.
Right.
Or whatever. You know. Hey, don't put your hand back. You know.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it goes up until you escalate. You know, not you know, you got your baton use, your pepper spray, you know, you're just grappling with somebody, or
Right.
and of course the final, the taser, and until the final would be actual deadly force.
Right.
And what people don't realize is that you are not limited to you don't have to go from stage 1 to stage 10.
Right.
You know, if somebody's shooting at you, you don't stand there and go, "Stop that."
Right. Oh,
You
grab
know,
your pepper spray.
You're already at the last stage.
Right.
If you're being physically attacked by somebody
Right.
shooting or pulling a knife on you.
Right.
And people don't realize that you need better than 21 or 27 feet distance between yourself and somebody that has a knife. They can actually charge you and hurt you before you could have your reaction time to get your gun out.
Right.
You know, so just because they have a knife, and no matter what kind of knife it is, or weapon, a club or whatever it is,
Right.
you have to escalate. You have to your force continuum has to be above what they're applying to you.
Right.
Does that make sense?
In a very short period of time.
Well, and it's like I tell everybody when they ask me about police shootings, I said, not only, you don't have seconds, you have milliseconds
Right.
to make a decision.
Right.
And the people upstairs in their little golden towers who are criticizing this, they have weeks and sometimes months to decide if what you did was right.
Right, right.
You had milliseconds to make a decision.
Right.
So I always tell them, I
I
say,
mean, think about the shooting you were in. That whole scenario lasted 3 seconds. And how many shots was fired in that?
15.
15 shots in 3 seconds.
He fired 8, I fired
Yeah.
7.
And so you're trying to make that decision, go through that force continuum, to match whatever force in less than the 3 seconds. Because it's not, if you take 3 seconds to figure it out,
Yeah.
what level you're going to be, you're already dead.
Well, you're dead by now,
Yeah.
usually. And I used to tell the rookies that I talked to, I'd say, look, I said, the deal is, I said, what's your goal when you go out on patrol? Well, I'm going to protect the public. I said, no, your goal is to go home that night.
Right.
To your loved ones, whoever it may be.
Right.
That's your goal. So you do what's necessary to get yourself home.
Right.
And I can already tell you that, you're going to be criticized no matter what.
Right.
There was people in the shooting I was in. I mean, it was total. I mean, I'm getting shot at.
Right.
I don't have a choice.
Right.
But there were people that criticized the fact that I was out of Fort Worth, up in the upper echelon. Why was he there?
Right.
Well, not only did I have chief's permission to be there,
Right.
but when we lived in Granbury, I would ride my motorcycle home a lot of times. And, you're going, just because I'm going through different counties, I am still a police officer.
Right.
And I'm obligated to act on a felony,
Right.
not a misdemeanor. I mean, just because somebody's speeding, I don't go
Right.
over and stop. I don't get involved in that.
Right.
But if I see a felony in my presence, I don't care if I'm on vacation in civilian clothes, I'm obligated
Right.
by the oath I took to act.
And for somebody to say that to me it doesn't make a difference, because just because you were from another place and you're in that situation, that guy opened fire on you. There's other people he opened fire to. So it doesn't matter if you were from somewhere else, because had you not been there, you wouldn't be able to help save some of the people that you were with.
Yeah.
So for these people, for the people who's complaining about that, stop blaming the officer, blame the guy with the gun shooting at the officer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and like I say, I've seen deals where police officers were totally wrong.
Right.
And rightly should have been either fired or whatever. There are cases where sometimes the sleep deprivation they may be going through or whatever, they're not thinking correctly.
Right.
They're out drinking. Whatever. So, I'm not saying that everybody is guiltless.
Right.
That's not the case. Nobody, myself included, is guiltless of a lot of things. I mean, I've driven my car back when I was a youngster, when I had more than I should have had to drink, and knew better.
Right.
So, I'm just saying that just because you're a police officer doesn't make you guiltless.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, and probably more than that, that officer that's there is trying to help people. He doesn't take that job with the hope that he's going to get involved in a shooting.
Right.
He hopes he goes his whole career and never shoots at anything but a paper target on the range.
Right.
And I was the same way. So.
And this is one of the things I talked to Judge Kerbo about too, is a lot of this stuff can be curbed by just complying.
Oh yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
All you have to do.
Yeah, just comply.
I like to say I was not a good kid when I was
Right.
a kid. I was in trouble a lot, but I had enough sense to know an adult, a police officer, anybody, school teacher. Don't get stupid with them. All you're
Right.
going to do is make it worse.
Right.
I mean, people say, I can't believe I got that ticket. I go, well, let me play this back to you and show you what you did. First thing, you got pulled over. You didn't like it.
Right.
As soon as the officer's walking up, you out the window going, "What'd you stop me for?"
Right.
That's not going to ingratiate yourself with that.
Right.
You know, he had a reason.
Right.
He wouldn't have stopped you.
Right.
And I promise you, it being in traffic the way I was for a long time, I can follow any car and I can find a violation.
Right.
If I want to just stop somebody,
Right.
you
Right.
can't drive 5 or 10 blocks without doing something wrong.
Mhm.
And none of us can,
Right.
you know? But, you know, I've had so many times I've stopped people and they're like, "I wouldn't do anything." I said,
Right.
"Well, how about when you crossed 4 lanes over here and didn't signal, you know, over on the
Right.
freeway?"
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
I have to get over there, I have to exit. I said, "I know, put your signal on and then go across." You know?
Right. Right.
But, you know, and I didn't like writing tickets, to be honest. I never liked writing tickets.
Yeah.
In fact, I was always the low ticket producer on my shift. The guys would call me in the evening, "How many tickets you write?" And I'd say, "Oh, whatever, 15, 20, whatever it was." And they're like, "Oh, I got some more than you did then."
Yeah.
I was as long as they could have one more than me, they were okay.
Right.
But I gave, you know, here's the thing. I'd stop some of these people in these old cars. They haven't got a pot to pee in.
Yeah.
I mean, I could probably write 8 or 10 violations.
Right.
They're not going to pay them because they don't have any money.
Right.
They're just going to go out and get another old car if they tow their car. I mean,
Right.
you know, write one or whatever and send them on their way. I mean, there's no sense in just heaping stuff on people that you know they're not going to pay it.
Right.
They don't have any money.
Right.
You know, they got maybe enough to get an old clunker, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, maybe that's wrong, maybe I shouldn't, but that's just the way I looked at it. And I'm actually, as far as I know, the only traffic officer that I have 3 letters I could have brought them, but were people who I'd written tickets to called in and said, instead of complaining, they called in and said, "You know, I don't think I really deserved that ticket, but that
Right.
officer was so professional and courteous, and
Right.
you know, I just want to make sure he gets commended for the way he acted."
Right.
And I would try to tell these guys in the academy classes, just because somebody runs a stop sign
Yeah.
or speeding, they didn't just rob a bank.
Right.
Don't treat them that way. They're
Right.
citizens.
Right.
You know, treat them with respect. I'll try it in all my contact with people. If they give me the effort, I would try to treat everybody with respect, regardless of who they are
Right.
or what status in life they are. You know,
Right.
so
So
I think that's the best advice I could give to any young officer coming in is treat people the way you'd want to be treated. It's
Right.
a simple rule.
Right.
It's a godly rule, you know, and you're going to go so much further because, you know, don't treat them with so lax that you have your own safety.
Right.
You know, I mean, be ready. You know,
Right.
watch their hands. Don't watch your face. Watch your hands and feet. You know, because that's what's going to harm you. But
Right.
you know, you don't have to treat them like they just robbed a bank if they're, you know, unless they did just rob a bank or
Right.
something. But, that's probably the best advice I could give them. And, it's a fun job. It could be a lot funner. When I was younger, it was a whole lot funner. But they've got so many restrictions on you now, and so many rules.
Yeah.
You know, it's.
It's just a tougher job.
I'm afraid it's gotten to the tipping point where these officers are going to be so eat up with the rules that they have to follow. They're going to be reluctant to be as safe as they should be
Right.
because they're thinking of, "Oh, can I do this? Or if I did this, would it be okay?" Or you
Right.
know what I'm saying?
Right.
And you don't have that time.
Yeah.
You just don't have that time.
Right.
You have to do whatever it is that you can do to keep yourself alive,
Right.
or somebody else, of course. You know.
Right.
So that would be the only advice I could give them now. And I enjoy it. I would always tell them when they would bring me into an academy class to talk, I'd say, "Look, I'm not an instructor. You don't have to listen to me. You can get up and walk out of this class now if you want to. It's just not going to hurt my feelings. But what I'm going to tell you is from what I've learned by being in 3 deadly force encounters.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear about it, then I'll tell you about it, and I'll
Right.
tell you what I think you should do."
Right.
I had a friend of mine had bought a house in New Mexico, and he'd asked me to go with him to do something. And I showed up at his house, and another guy I knew, another officer showed up, and he said, "Well, I wasn't gonna go with Harry because I know what a horrible driver he is." He said, "But then I found out you're going with him, and I know you can't die,
Right.
so I figured
So you
we'd
get-
be okay, you know." And I
Right.
said, "Well, has it dawned on you that maybe we'd have a wreck and I'd be the only one to live?"
Right.
I didn't think of it like that.
Right. That'd be the first thing I thought of. Well, at least he's gonna live.
Yeah, they've all got in their mind that I can't be killed.
Right.
But I'm raising an 11-year-old. We got her when she was 18 months. She's a grandchild on my wife's side. And I didn't do too well with some of my other kids and exes, and I think maybe that this is the chance I'm given to redeem myself for some of the things that I've done wrong.
Right.
And maybe this is the reason why I have been able to live this
Right.
long. Because I can assure you, if I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken a lot better care of myself.
Right.
I'll be 75 in July. So.
Right. So, and that just shows that, you know, that God's not done with you yet, 'cause you're still here, which means you still have a purpose.
Evidently, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm,
So,
yeah. It's hard getting out of bed in the morning anymore,
Right.
but yeah, it's.
so what are you, what kind of things are you working on now?
Hmm?
What kind of things are you working on now? I know you're a part of some different groups.
Oh, well, the Halo for Freedom Warriors Foundation and some of those I made some parachute jumps. I made a couple of those tandem jumps, one into Texas Motor Speedway recently, and did a helicopter hunt. What I'll do is these groups are either for military or combined military and first responders that are
Right.
injured on the job or whatever. And,
Right.
They have retreats and that kind of thing. And I like to, I'll build I'll assemble an AR or something, let them auction them off
Right.
so they can get some money, you know, for the deal. So, nonprofit organization. My wife and I used to drag race cars in the Beat the Heat deal, which is where you have a car that's similar to a squad car. It has lights and markings and so forth. Take it to the drag strip, and the whole idea, it's a nonprofit. The whole
Right.
idea is to try to tell kids to race on the track as opposed to the street.
Right.
Keep, you know,
The curb drag racing.
we all race
Yeah.
on the street, and
Right.
you know, we got a car. First thing we want to do is go out and drag race.
Right.
But it's a lot better if you just pay a couple of bucks, go to a local drag strip, and you can race that thing all day long and
Right.
not get any trouble. You know.
And the what I like about that program too is that you get to interact with the police. So
Yeah, we always had, part of the Beat the Heat deal is that you couldn't just go to the drag strip and race, you also had to exhibit your car at schools and
Oh,
things.
okay.
Let the kids come in and sit in them and look at them, turn the lights on, whatever.
Right.
Fire the motor up, or, you know.
and then you get to get on the track and then race against
Yeah,
them.
exactly, yeah.
So to me, that's a lot of fun. I know they did that back a few years back over on Northwest Highway. They used to have a lot of
Oh, yeah.
drag races up and down Northwest Highway
Yeah.
going into Dallas, and they started a program like that where the Beat the Heat program, where they took the track and they got the kids off the street and let them race against the.
Oh, yeah, and it's fun, they love
Yeah.
that. And we went to Amarillo, Amarillo one time, and we had these T-shirts that said "I beat the heat," you know. So
Right.
if you outrun us, and we'll give you the T-shirt,
Oh, that's cool.
you know. So,
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I think that was one of the best times my wife had with her car. We was dry racing that then. But it got to the point when we had like I say, we got the daughter at 18. She's actually a granddaughter, but I went ahead and adopted her. So
Right.
at 18 months, so you can't go to a drag race with two cars and so forth and pawn your kid off on something. Say, here,
Right.
watch her while we go race. You know,
Right.
you can't do that. So I
Yeah.
told my wife, I said, when this becomes work and quits being fun, we went ahead and sold the cars, and we don't do
Yeah.
that anymore. But I do miss it.
Yeah. So they still have that program.
Yeah, oh,
They
they
still-
they still race. I know a lot of the guys. And still, did you see the picture of my car?
I
Yeah, I'll show you my phone. when we get
Cool.
done.
And we'll put them. I'll put them on the video when.
Yeah. I think, actually, the deal I've got shows them on the outtake deal.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely put those on, and then I'll also put a link onto the Halo Foundation. If somebody wanted to donate.
Oh, yeah. Do you remember in the late, no, I guess it was mid-90s, the Golden Knights who parachute jumped for the Army?
No.
Okay, well, you know, you got the Blue Angels, you got the
Right.
Canadian Wild Geese, and, you know, with the plane.
Right.
They also have a free fall parachute team
Okay.
for the Army. It's called the Golden Knights. And one of them is a guy named Dana Bowman who lives in Weatherford now. And he was doing the free fall a long way. He was doing a diamond pattern with another jumper, and they would cross and cross back before they'd open the chute low.
Right.
And they ran together, and it killed one of them.
Oh, wow.
And he lost an arm, a leg, and I forget what else.
Wow.
And he still parachutes. He's the one that got involved with the Halo.
Okay.
That's how I got involved in it. It's through him.
Wow.
He was at a gym where me and my wife work out at Metroflex Gym in Fort Worth.
Okay.
And just a super guy. I mean,
Cool.
we always go to Weatherford High School and talk to those classes.
Wow.
Those kids there. I got that friend of mine that I grew up with. I told you was in the 173rd Airborne. He got put up for the Medal of Honor and wound up getting the DSC, which is just below the Medal of Honor.
Oh, wow.
And they looked at it again back when Obama was in, thinking they might still give him the Medal of Honor. He was at Doc Owen, the 173rd in Vietnam. And I got some medals and stuff. I actually got the Fort Worth Medal of Honor. They have a Medal of Honor in
wow.
the city for my shooting.
Oh, wow.
I also got Officer of the Year for 2013. I got sent to Police Week and also to Philadelphia for the police chiefs deal for the top cop
wow.
for the police chiefs.
Right.
And I didn't get it. I was one of 4 that were put in for it.
The
Though.
nomination.
Pretty interesting to go get to see. Well, if you've been to DC, you get to.
I flew into to New York to meet with the manufacturer before, but it was a 1-day deal. So we came in at Dulles Airport, but I didn't get to stop to see anything. I was there.
DC is where the capital is.
Yeah.
It's not a very big place, but it's got a lot of history there, a lot of things. I mean, Space and Air Museum is there, the Lincoln, Arlington National
Right.
Cemetery. It's just, and plus we got to go through the Pentagon too. It's pretty interesting. And I'd like to go back. I didn't get to see near as much as I
Right.
wanted to see. There's a lot of things to see.
Right.
A lot of history.
Wow.
It's funny because my wife's dad was a Marine. He was in Korea at the Chosin Reservoir, which I don't know if you know anything about it, but it was a huge battle during the Korean War.
Mm.
And I mean, it was literally like 30, 40 below they were fighting in this,
Wow.
frozen. That's why they call it the frozen Chosin. Corpses however the men fell, that's how they stayed on.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And she knew that he was a Marine and knew that he was there, but he never talked about it with her. And when I got into the family, we would talk. He would tell me stuff. His kids knew nothing really
Right.
about what happened to him, but I did because
Right.
he felt comfortable, telling me about it. And we got to the Pentagon. The Pentagon has a lot of levels, and each level there's a hallway, and this one hallway is about the Korean War. My wife and I were walking down, and she took huge pictures of showing these battles, things that took place. And she said, "My gosh, is this where my dad was?" I said, "Yeah."
Wow.
It's pretty amazing,
So up till then, she didn't even know. I mean,
Huh?
so up till then, she didn't even
No.
realize that's the kind of.
Well, my daughter, my son's daughter came down to DC when we were there, and we were going through Arlington Cemetery. Of course, the first thing you do is go see Kennedy's Eternal Flame and all that
Right.
stuff.
Right.
That was actually land that was owned by Robert E. Lee
Mm.
during the Civil War, prior to the Civil War.
Right.
That was his ex-wife's house.
Oh, wow.
Well, not his ex-wife, but his wife's house.
Mm.
And they took that from him when he went to the Confederacy. But
Right.
anyway, and we walked down the wall, the Vietnam Wall, if you've
Right.
ever seen that. And we were walking, looking, and stopped about halfway down. And she stopped me. She said, "Dad, how many people were killed in Vietnam?" She had no idea,
Right.
And even my wife really had not. She was when I was in Vietnam, she was in high school. I mean,
Right.
all she's thinking about is boys and going to dances.
Right.
You know, people didn't really, even though it was just more televised than any other war,
Yeah.
or so far. I mean, even Iraq and Afghanistan, they embed journalists with the units, but I don't think you still see as much as they showed of the Vietnam War.
Right.
On the evening news or whatever.
Right.
Not a fun place.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show, man.
Oh, I enjoyed it. I'm sorry if
Yeah.
I rattled on. I
No,
don't know
no.
anybody that could sit through listening to me for this long.
No, that's great. It's,
I'll say one thing. Regardless of what happens to me from this point on, I've had an interesting life, and it certainly hasn't been boring.
right.
So,
Yeah, it sounds like I mean, you have a lot of great stories, and and your journey is just, I've been excited to be able to sit down and be able to talk to you about it.
Thank you. I appreciate
Been
it.
looking forward to it. So.
I tend to ramble, so I'm sorry about that.
Oh no, it's all right. I mean, like I said, the whole idea of my show is just bring people on and let them just share their journey, and and I think that all the stuff you've been through, people can sit down for 2 hours to hear some of the advice that you have.
That isn't all of it, believe me.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff I couldn't tell.
Right. But I mean, to hear some of the things that you've gone through, and then too, they could see sacrifices that people have made prior to, especially people who are looking into joining the military or joining the police force.
Right,
They can
yeah.
see what
Yeah, I'd like people to know that, this defunding the police and this kind of an era we're in now, you got to remember that thin blue line is the only thing that's between you and the bad guys,
right, right,
And if you tie their hands too much, it's going to be down to the individual to protect his family from
right.
what may be coming,
Yeah, and I agree with that. And the same people who are criticizing wanting to defund the police also want to disarm the public.
Right, yeah.
So if you don't have the police backing you, and you don't have guns to protect yourself, I mean, what do you have left?
Yeah, well, every communist country from Argentina on up is, the first thing they did is take away the local.
Right.
Germany did it. All of them.
Right.
The first thing they do is take the weapons away.
Yep.
Because tyrants, people who want to have the power over people, don't want them to be able to fight back.
Right.
And that's actually what the Second Amendment's all about. I get so sick of hearing people yakking about, you don't need that to go hunting. That's not the purpose of the Second
Right.
Amendment.
And I tell people at the same time, they're like, oh, you don't need this kind of gun to go hunting. The Second Amendment wasn't made for hunting.
No, it was to take care of your government when they trample on your
Right.
rights.
Right.
That's what it's for.
So anyway,
All right. Well, thank you.
well, I
Thanks
appreciate so much for you being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Anyway, it's been a real honor to be able to sit down and talk to you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Cool.
that.
All right,
I
guys.
enjoyed it.
Thank you guys for joining us on today's show. Remember, you guys are uniquely designed with a purpose, and always keep moving forward. Till next week, peace.